gums at each other any chance they get. The fight clock is brought to you by Modelo. One of the greatest knockouts you'll ever see! It's time!
For you to sit back, relax, and listen to a complete and fucking utter armchair expert give his completely and utterly useless opinions on the one hell of an amazing sport that is MMA.
G'day, guys. Here we are, that time of the month once again, and I am here endeavoring to give you a better podcast than UFC 304's. Sorry about that, by the way. I was very time-strapped, and I also do apologize that this was not out yesterday, as it usually would be, but I was a little inebriated last night, so I didn't get a chance to sit up and record the podcast as I normally would and mix and master it and put it together and put it out. By the time you're done, it's probably over an hour and a half it takes. So I did not have the time or the energy to do that. But speaking of UFC 304, let's do the recap, because I did end up watching the card. Because shockingly, it was indeed on at the right time here in Australia, which I was shocked about. So I had to race down to another pub in my area, because as I think I've said on here, my local pub that I would normally go to, the Plaza Tavern, is closed at the moment. And also so is the other one in the same shopping centre. So I'm not unfortunately able to go there at the moment, so I had to race over to another pub to watch it. I got there just in time for the Paddy the Baddy fight, which is what I really wanted, one of the ones I really wanted to see. And Paddy got it done. Thankfully, he beat Bobby Green, as I was glad about, because Bobby Green was just really not being really respectful. I think beating Tony gave him a big head, as I said, I think, in that podcast. Tom Aspinall also retained his interim heavyweight championship, again, as ridiculous as that is, by knockout, I think, in the first round. It was pretty shocking, but perhaps the most disappointing and shocking result of that entire fight card was Leon Edwards getting basically dominated for 5 rounds by Belal Muhammad in his own home country, and losing the belt. That was quite a shock, to be honest with you. I did not expect that, but it happened, and CM Punk also shouted out Belal Muhammad on Monday Night Raw, which was pretty cool. But yeah, that was UFC 304 from Manchester, England, which I did end up seeing, shockingly. And yeah, it was pretty decent all around, except for the end. But yeah, not bad at all. Anyway, I'm going to take a break, as always, and when I come back, we will get into UFC 305, talk about the Sphere card, UFC 306, someone being added to UFC 307 who's fighting again, shockingly, and UFC 308, plus a few other topics. All that and more when I come back. UFC 305 is back in the land down under, baby. Coming from Perth, same place the UFC was when it first came back to Australia for the first time in 5 years. UFC 284, Volkanovski versus Makhachev. Those were good memories, man. Those were good memories, and it is back indeed. And we have got a stacked card for the Perth fans. Let's look it up and go to the UFC website. God, that poster looks good, by the way. The UFC is definitely killing it with the posters lately. Let's go to the bottom. Oh, yeah, no. It's on there. Let's see. Ooh, Casey O'Neill's back on the card again. She was on 284, I'm pretty sure. Junior Tafa's on the card. Oh, yes, they're definitely fucking bringing out the Aussies indeed. Bam Bam Tuivasa, we're getting to the business end of things, ladies and gentlemen. Bam Bam Tuivasa takes on Jairzinho Rozenstruik. I believe, rank 10 is Bam Bam, rank 12 is Jairzinho in the heavyweight division. Okay, so Jairzinho, I can't pronounce his name. You know me in names, guys. So Jairzinho is the favorite, whereas Bam Bam is the underdog. I think that's a theme with this card. The Aussies are coming in the underdogs. Maybe it's an omen. But I'm really looking forward to that fight. Don't know who's going to win, but either way, it is going to be a scrap. Mateusz Gamrot versus Dan Hooker. Dan Hooker's back in front of the Aussies, mate. He fought hard to get on this card. There was rumours that he was going to be fighting Oliveira, but it looks like that didn't happen. He's fighting Mateusz Gamrot, who is the favourite. Rank number 5 versus rank number 11. Lightweight bout, of course. Don't know who's going to win that one. I hope Dan Hooker wins. Just because you guys know I love me some Dan Hooker. The City Kickboxing boys are out on this card, but that is definitely going to be a scrap indeed, as all Dan Hooker's fights are. Now, we get to the co-main event of the evening. Rank number 4, Kai Kara France takes on the Perth boy, Steve Erceg, who I now know I was pronouncing the name wrong of in the 301 podcast. I do apologise to him, but there's no odds. There's no odds at all for this. They don't know how it's going to go. And neither do I, to be honest. But either way, it's going to be a scrap. And, of course, we get to the main event of the evening. Dricus du Plessis takes on Israel, the last stylebender, Adesanya, for the middleweight title. It's currently saying, this is odd, right? Because the odds, I just watched the press conference, which I'll talk about in a minute, but it was saying that the odds as of the press conference were pick 'em, which in other words, they couldn't pick. But it's now saying that Izzy's the favorite narrowly. That is interesting. I guess the odds really are subject to change, but there it is, guys. UFC 305. The UFC is coming back to the land down under in a very big way indeed. So we'll talk about the press conference, right? Because I just watched it. All the boys are out and about. Dan Hooker, Kai Kara France, Steve Erceg, all the main guys. Of course, Dricus and Izzy. Bam Bam. Did I say Bam Bam? I think. Yeah, he was up there. But things got heated between Dricus and Izzy. Dricus said something about Izzy's heritage or something like that. And Izzy's like, don't you fucking talk about my story. You don't know my fucking story. You weren't there, blah, blah, blah. And he started crying because his mum and dad were in the audience. I don't know if they've ever been in a press conference, to be honest. They certainly never showed him at any of his press conferences, but his mum and dad were in the audience and he started crying and he said, I'll always fight for you guys, which I don't like Izzy, but yeah, you got to admire that. A man who's strong enough to, cry in front of everyone. It's pretty admirable, really. By the way, I didn't say when I talked about the Dricus and Izzy fight who I think's going to win. Oh, God, it is going to be a close fight, I reckon. But I'm kind of hoping, as crazy as this sounds, because I've started to dislike him a little bit, just a little. At least I disliked his fight style and some of the things he's done. I mean, I admit he had a historic championship reign, obviously, and he's definitely a very captivating fighter, but there's just a lot of stuff I don't like about him, especially over the last year. But I kind of hope Izzy wins, to be honest, because I've really started to dislike Dricus, particularly since the Sean fight. Just the way he's carried himself, I really haven't been a fan of it. I mean, I would love to see the Dricus rematch with Sean, probably more than the Izzy rematch, because Sean obviously destroyed Izzy. But I do sort of hope Izzy wins more. I don't know why, I just do. But anyway, that was, of course, UFC 305 and the press conference. The UFC is coming back to Perth with a bang, man. What more can I say? Or back to Australia with a bang. Sorry about that if you heard that. But anyway, guys, that was a bit longer than I expected, so I'm going to take another break. And when we come back, I'll talk UFC 306, 307, 308, and a few other things. All that and more when I come back. I forgot to mention in there that as much as they did bring all the Aussie boys out, it's a shame a few weren't on there. It's a shame Jack Della Maddalena isn't on there, the Perth boy. I'd have loved to have seen that TNT walk out again. And it's kind of a shame Jake Matthews isn't on there, because he's been on a lot of the Australian cards. You know, I love him. Obviously, he's from Victoria. Yeah, I'd have loved him to have definitely stacked it from top to bottom with Aussies, but hopefully they do when they come to Melbourne, because I'd love to see it, because I'm going to try and go. But there is some stacked cards coming up, ladies and gentlemen. UFC 306, the first to be at the Sphere in Las Vegas. We'll see Suga Sean O'Malley take on Merab Dvalishvili for the bantamweight title, as well as Valentina Shevchenko versus Alexa Grasso for, I'm going to guess, the flyweight title, I think. Is it not the flyweight title? Let's have a look on the UFC website. Yeah, it is. So Alexa is fighting Valentina for her, defending her women's flyweight title against Valentina, and also the rematch, or the attempted fight again. They're going to do it again, because I think one thing I didn't say about UFC 303 is that Brian Ortega wasn't on the card. He ended up having to pull out with like 4 hours notice. So they're going to try it again. Brian Ortega versus Diego Lopez on the Sphere card. So that is definitely going to be a big one. But that is not all, ladies and gentlemen, because the UFC just announced earlier today that Alex Poatan Pereira is going to be fighting on UFC 307 in, where is it? In Utah, Salt Lake City, Utah. So there's not enough about the fight announced for me to talk about, really, but that's exciting and interesting, really. So yeah, no, that's really it's interesting, because I had thought that Alex would take a break after main eventing UFC 303 when Conor pulled out, but it is what it is. Yeah. But that is not all, of course, because UFC 308 in Abu Dhabi is going to see Ilia Topuria defend his featherweight title, which he recently won from Volk, against the man who chased Volk for it 3 times and just had a banger of a fight at UFC 300, Max Blessed Holloway. I'd always said I wondered how Max felt after UFC 298, because he had just announced, or it had just been announced, that he was going to be fighting Gaethje for the BMF title at UFC 300 when Volk lost. So I bet he was kind of kicking himself, but I guess he gets the shot now. Also, they're going to try another fight that ended up having to get scrapped again. But Robert Bobby Knuckles Whittaker, another favourite of mine, another Aussie boy, takes on Khamzat Chimaev. That's going to be an interesting one indeed. And Cyril Gane, also the guy who lost to Jon Jones a year ago, takes on Alexander Volkov at heavyweight. Nothing else really worth talking about, but a couple of banger cards coming up indeed. Now, let's just finish the podcast off talking about two things. One, it is rumored, I don't think it's been announced yet, but it is rumored that Jon Jones will be on UFC 309 at, I think, Madison Square Garden, which will be in November, later this year. So about the time I speculated he would return, which I guess I'm a clairvoyant, but he'll finally make his long-awaited return, allegedly, on UFC 309, which I am definitely excited for that indeed. He'll be fighting Stipe on that card, which I got my own views on that, as to most of the MMA community, as you know. But anyway, get it out of the way so Aspinall can finally get his chance at the undisputed belt, whoever wins, because Dana has said that he is indeed next. But the final thing I want to talk about real quick is that Dana, speaking of the guy I'm about to talk about, came out and said that Conor will not be fighting this year, which is interesting because you would have thought they would have tried to schedule it around the same time or maybe even on the same card as Jones. And Conor actually came out and angrily said, December's the month, Dana. December's the month. What do you not see? Blah, blah, blah. You know, so the rift between them has come up again. But yeah, are we ever going to see this fight with Michael Chandler? For Chandler's sake, I kind of hope so. But after that, you know, just kind of fight again, or does he just retire? You know, does he fight his contract out? I don't know, but Dana has said that we will not see it this year, which is a shame, of course. We were meant to see it at UFC 303 and it didn't happen, which was a shame because the card was pretty decently sold and a lot of people a lot of people were souring on Conor anyway, but they've kind of soured on him even more now because of that. Like I said, for Chandler's sake, I hope he gets it because he's waited for so long, but it is what. And also, Chandler came out and said on Twitter, it looks like the fight's off, and Conor's like, oh, okay. Like, come on, Chandler, I know you're probably kidding, but Conor doesn't really want to fight you anyway, so don't give him an opportunity to fight someone else. But yeah, anyway, guys, that'll be it for me. I hope you enjoy this banger card that's back in the land down under. Let's show them how we do it. And until the Sphere card, as always, catches.